Are you aware of who is in the driver's seat of your life? Are you also aware that to at least some degree, your childhood fucked you up? Because no child comes out of childhood with some level of trauma. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. But there is such thing as an unconscious program that very well might be running your life. And quite frankly, for the longest time, maybe something that has been running your life and you might be unaware of it. I'm genuinely not trying to gaslight anybody here, but what I am here to do is talk about the reality of traumatic childhoods that people experience and the unconscious program that people are actually unaware of that their traumatic childhood trapped them in. Repetition compulsion. When you learn life, how to be a person in a certain way, usually because people have traumatic childhoods to any degree, they learn unhealthy dynamics, and with that, repetition compulsion. So, this video is going to basically be portioned into two different subjects, and those subjects are basically at the same time going to intertwine with each other in a way that will help people understand that they may be running in an unconscious program and they may have been for a long time. And then the opposite of that is going to be the awakening from it, the awakening from the unconscious autopilot of what was experienced in childhood. So imagine, for instance, you were traumatized in childhood. You were, to some degree, even if it was mild, even if it was less. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. There's no such thing as a childhood without trauma. There's no such thing as a child without some level of marring, some level of scathing, some level of trauma. But imagine that you came out of childhood and now you're an adult and you're unaware of the trauma that you experienced in childhood. In fact, not only are you unaware of it, you haven't done anything about it. So, what does that mean? It means that essentially the little you that was traumatized in childhood is driving the vehicle of your life with all of its repetition compulsion that is exceedingly unhealthy and reckless. But not only that, imagine the mindset that comes with that unhealthy repetition compulsion. Imagine, for instance, that in childhood, when you were traumatized, you were actually emotionally stagnated there. So, like, you could be 30, 40, 50, 60 years old and have the emotional maturity of a little boy or a little girl. But not only that, because there's an interesting way of looking at this in almost like an opposite way. Imagine as a child, your childhood, your family system lacked healthy boundaries, and with that, you were actually made to take on age inappropriate responsibilities. Maybe there were not healthy boundaries in terms of what was introduced to you by your parents, material, conversation wise. Maybe you were made out to do things that were not your responsibility as a child. Work, make money. That in and of itself also fucks up a child because it basically takes them out of their childhood and into adulthood as a child. So you could have been emotionally stagnated somewhere between 2 and 6 years old. You could have also been rushed out of your childhood with adult responsibilities as a child. These both fuck a child up. So now with that, maybe you haven't done anything about it, and it's not good or bad or right or wrong. There's nothing to be shamed. There's nothing to be ashamed of here. There's no guilt tripping. There's none of that stuff. It's just simply a looking at it for what it is and a recognizing of what is actually happening. So imagine you're an adult now, which you don't really have to imagine, just more so understand. You're an adult now, and metaphorically, there is this vehicle, which is basically you. You are the vehicle of your life. And with that, you are also the driver. You're in the driver's seat of the vehicle of your life. If you have not done anything about your trauma, about your childhood, if you've not explored any of it, maybe you're not even aware of it. And that's okay. But it is also at the same time unhealthy because repetition compulsion has you doing the same things that you were when you were a child, the same unhealthy behavioral patterns. So becoming aware of it is absolutely very crucial. Because let me paint a very clear picture. Even as a full-grown adult, as a 30-year-old, as a 40-year-old, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90-year-old, you could still have the emotional maturity of a 2-year-old, of a 6-year-old. And it, in a very unhealthy way, affects your life. It affects pretty much every area of your life. At least I would argue, based on what I've learned. Imagine your relationships. Imagine trying to, as an adult, have an adult relationship with a 2-year-old or a 6-year-old. It doesn't function properly. Because something that children don't really understand but are hopefully taught are boundaries. They are all over the place. I mean, the very first thing that happens in any human's life in infancy is the id. The id is entirely life or death, survival based, all or nothing. You can't have a healthy adult relationship with somebody that is emotionally stagnated there. And so understanding that can help you see that, well, if you are emotionally stagnated at a very early age, imagine what it's like driving the vehicle that is you as an emotionally immature person. Imagine, for instance, you are stuck entirely as the id. Well, think about it this way. Imagine how destructive behavioral things are in infancy until basically it's all corrected. You are life or death, all or nothing, survival based. Everything is black or white, good or bad. Imagine driving the car as an id. You don't even understand the concept of boundaries. They are not even there to you yet. You just care about everything right now, the gratification of the moment. You don't have any understanding of the future. You don't have any understanding of discipline, of how to train yourself to wait until an event for something to happen. Everything is now, 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 now. Everything is me, 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 me. You really don't have understanding of self and other. You don't even know the difference between your mouth and your fucking butthole. You have no understanding for the multidimensionality that is life, that is all of that stuff that's necessary to understand. So imagine that, or somewhere between that and, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 years of age. The reality of the matter is that it is emotional immaturity. Having any sort of relationship or trying to have any sort of relationship with somebody that is emotionally immature, in other words, emotionally stagnated, or not only that, but also, like I was saying before, you learned responsibilities as a child that were not yours to take on. You were rushed out of childhood to become an adult really fast because you were raised by parents that lacked healthy boundaries and were in and of themselves emotionally immature. So you learned that you had to mature up real quick. So you also learned another boundaryless dynamic that basically had you taking care of people that were adults when you were a child. So isn't that fascinating? How it can actually be the opposite way around. But what does that do to you? How does that fuck up your life? Well, it took you out of childhood really quick. You didn't get to have the space to develop as a person, the space to develop as an individual. You didn't get the healthy boundaries, the individuation, the differentiation. No, you were made to take on responsibilities that were not your own because the people that you were raised by lacked healthy boundaries. So, and I'm not saying that it's either or, but it's like you could have been emotionally stagnated. Maybe you were emotionally stagnated at a very early age. Maybe you were taught to take on responsibilities that were not yours, that were not age appropriate. Either way, you got fucked up, you got traumatized. It's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just that it's unhealthy if you don't do anything about it. And it's also unhealthy if you're operating in this unconscious program that was created in childhood. And after that, reinforced by all the objects referring to people that you were attracted to and chose to have, even if it was unconsciously and based in survival, chose to have relationships with. So, are you aware that you may be running by an unconscious program that your traumatic childhood trapped you in? Are you aware of that? Are you aware of what it actually means? How it actually limits you? Let me put into contrast here, because I think it's important too, the difference between being raised in a childhood of survival and being raised in a childhood that is actually healthy. And again, no childhood is perfect, no parent is perfect. Survival-based childhoods are where families are basically emotionally unhealthy, emotionally immature. That usually ends up in survival. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. You learn as a person that as you are, you're basically not accepted. You can't be loved for who you are. So you learn to wear masks, you learn to be somebody else, you learn a bunch of unhealthy defense mechanisms that fuck up your capacity to be a healthy individual. Whereas a healthy childhood consisted of healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation. The difference between the two of these is massive, because as a healthy child, you got to take the space to yourself to learn about yourself and discover who you actually are and develop an ego state that is actually healthier. You got to develop a personality that was healthier rather than, maladaptive stuff, rather than not even knowing who you are, because since you had emotionally immature parents, you didn't get the healthy mirroring, and with that, you didn't get the healthy development of an ego state, and with that, a healthy personality. So you might actually be unaware of the unconscious program, which speaks in and of itself. It is unconscious. You cannot be aware of something that is unconscious. Something that is unconscious within you, you cannot be aware of. It only becomes something that you're aware of when you see it. It's like if you're in a dark room, like that's like pitch black, completely black, you can't see the things that are in there unless you have a flashlight. Everything to you is just black. So imagine that in the unhealthy childhood, you learned a bunch of beliefs about yourself, that you are to be ashamed of yourself, that you're a piece of shit, that you're unworthy, all of these unhealthy belief systems. But you only believed that because you didn't have a flashlight to see that there's actually all of this gold and all of these beautiful things. And imagine, like, for instance, your body is the room that is dark, completely pitch black, right? And so with that, you didn't have the flashlight growing up. And I'll make the flashlight into a metaphor for the healthy boundaries, the individuation, and the differentiation. No, instead, you grew up in an enmeshed system where everyone's shit was your shit and your shit was everyone else's shit. You took on shit that was not supposed to be yours because the people in your environment and your family system lacked healthy boundaries. So the flashlight was not present in your childhood. The flashlight for you to be able to set healthy boundaries, to be able to individuate and differentiate, was not present. You could not take the metaphorical flashlight and shine it on you and be like, oh, wait a second, I'm not an unworthy piece of shit. I'm not to be ashamed of myself. I don't have to feel bad about myself. I don't have to believe that I'm a bad object, referring to person. Because mom and dad not wanted, it's just that the way that they were. They lacked healthy boundaries, so they projected their shit onto me. Oh, but wait a second, I'm not that way. And so becoming aware of this stuff, taking the flashlight and actually shining it over your body. Maybe you've had all of these metaphorical chains covering your body, restricting you from seeing yourself. And then you take this flashlight and you're like, wait a second. Oh my goodness, I am beautiful. I am not ugly. I am not a piece of shit. I am not unworthy. Look at this. I'm taking this flashlight and I'm shining it on myself. Oh my God, I do have a heart. Oh my God, I have a heart. It is there. I'm not this ugly, terrible monster that I've been led to believe that I am by people that lacked healthy boundaries and projected their own feelings of monstrosity and insecurity onto me. This is why it's very important. I'll end off with this. This is why it's very important to become aware of anything within you that is unconscious. I believe it was Socrates that said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And I understand, I made a video about it yesterday. Pretty sure it was yesterday's video. I understand that it can be really difficult and uncomfortable to look at yourself, to become aware of anything that previously was unconscious, but it will transform your fucking life. It literally will. It's the difference between being in the driver's seat as somebody who is emotionally stagnated and unaware of their fucked upness, their trauma, and somebody who's actually taken the time to look at the intricate detail of all of the marring and scathing that took place in childhood and actually become aware of it. Like, holy shit, just as an example, like, holy shit, I was not talking from myself specifically, just literally talking as example. It's like, holy shit, I was raised by somebody that was emotionally immature, and therefore I was stagnated at an age of, I don't know, infancy, of toddlerhood, childhood, whatever it was. Somewhere between 2 and 6, somewhere between infancy and 6 or 8, I don't know. But I was emotionally stagnated there because the trauma that I experienced was so severe. But now I'm becoming aware of that which was previously unconscious. But wow, I was actually being run by this program that was unconscious. And all of these different things that I was doing through repetition compulsion, all of these unhealthy and fucked up behavioral patterns, now I'm becoming aware of them. And now I'm becoming aware of the slices. When I say slices, I mean the damage to the ego state. The wow, this is wild. I'm becoming aware of how things turned out for me. And the more I become aware of it, the more I become conscious of the unconscious, the more I can change and transform my life.